You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast, Nottinghamshire Live, where we are here to talk about Forest 0, Fulham 1, disappointingly so, and I'm joined by broadcaster Chris Ellis, who Forest fans will know from Radio Nottingham and Panthers fans will know from a variety of mediums around ice hockey, so he's a familiar face to us all and a friend to me, so welcome Chris.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
No problem, we've been trying for long enough.
Yeah, it just felt like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Plenty of near misses, but you're here now.
Yeah.
What did you make of it last night? Disappointing goal?
It was frustrating, wasn't it? Especially, after they played so well against in Derby. I mean, that's the frustrating thing, isn't it? That they played so well against Derby on Saturday, couldn't see the game out. And you're bound to have bad games like last night. It's going to happen. You're not going to be perfect all season, are you? But you just felt there was a difference in class. And I bumped into someone this morning, and they said, you could see the difference in class. And I pointed out, well, Forest went to Fulham at the start of the season, didn't they, in August, and won the game. And by all accounts, that was a great performance. But for once, Forest seemed to have very little ideas. You didn't think they were going to concede many. And, they can, I'm not going to say it was a fluky goal. It was a good goal, wasn't it? But it did fortunate to give them the lead at the time, Fulham. But it was the lack of creativity that was a little bit of surprise. They're never a team that are going to get 15, 20 chances a game. But yeah, it was the fact that they rarely looked like scoring. And we've been able to watch every game since lockdown, since the restart, because of the various platforms that the games are being shown on. And yeah, it was just the fact that they really struggled that was a frustrating thing.
Do you think they were that bad in the first half? Because I didn't think they were too bad. I think it was a rare occasion when, as a Forest defence, they couldn't do too much of the goal. It was just that kind of, there was no second gear in the second half. That was what I found disappointing, really. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they weren't terrible. No. They just lacked creativity. The players that you expected, to be able to create didn't. And Graben looked a bit isolated. That can happen from time to time, I think, with the way that Forest play. But yeah, as you say, the first half was okay, but nothing to shout home about. But I thought they were going to go in the break at 0-0, and then I felt they got every chance to still go on and win the game, even though they hadn't been fantastic. But the second half definitely was worse. They battled hard to get back in the game, but as I say, you didn't. You can't picture many chances. There was the Cash cross, I think, that flew through the box. One or two other chances, but it wasn't like Saturday where you look back and think, crumbs. If there was 3 or 4 clear-cut chances on Saturday, wasn't there? But it just wasn't like that on Wednesday. Last night, and that was a frustrating thing.
With the goal itself, I mean, obviously it's a great strike. Watson gets pretty unlucky, I thought, but it does hit Arter on the hand. In the Premier League, I guess that wouldn't have stood. What's your take on VAR, and would you prefer to see it in the Championship?
Oh, I mean, that's a massive question, isn't it? Because we've seen since the restart with the Premier League, the fact that it's not invincible, is it? I mean, I can't get my head. 1 minute I think VAR is great, the next minute I'm not a big fan of VAR. I think. I can see why it's there, and I can see why it's a benefit. So yeah, I basically think that the VAR used in the right way is a plus for whatever league it's in. You remember like when technology was brought into cricket and tennis, and it takes a while to bed in and to get it right. But yeah, VAR probably would have ruled it out, the goal. But yeah, I mean. The goal line technology saw that Derby's goal was to cross the line on Saturday. Would that have happened? I mean, on first look on Saturday, I didn't think it was in. But then obviously when the technology shows it in, it's a fair goal. So VAR's got its critics, but you'd like to think that more times than not, it can get the decision right.
Dan's listening in, and viewers will never have seen Dan, but if he can come in, because he's a Villa fan, as you'll tell by his accent in a sec.
Oh, thanks.
What's your take on VAR, Dan, as someone who's seen it in the Premier League and the impact it can have on their team? Mostly negative in Villa's case. How do you view VAR?
It's annoying, isn't it? It's one of those things that in theory, you think, yes, this is a good kind of progression for football, that if technology helps these silly decisions go away, then that's great. But some of the things that you see when it's kind of this massive scrutiny and analysis over someone's boot, this kind of tiny fractions being over lines and drawings coming up and it taking kind of several minutes to decide whether someone is slightly offside or not, implementation of it for a couple of seasons and kind of everyone being on the same page with what the rules are, I think it will work. I just think right now there's too many kind of grey areas for what the kind of the laws of the game are. I think that's probably the problem in some cases, that what is a handball? Is it where does it stop? I think there's some confusion about things like that, rather than technology being yes or no. I think it's that the way it's used probably needs a little bit of work.
Well, it's an interesting, but hopefully it's one that applies more to Forest next season, but it certainly cost them yesterday. Thanks, Dan.
Is that all right for my cameo? Can I go back now?
You can head back. You can disappear back into the ether. Bye. What about the second half then, Chris? You kind of hinted at it there. Forest never kicked on, and Lamucci made a lot of subs in a quick space of time that didn't really come off as they made a positive impact at Derby. It didn't really work last night, did it?
No one made an impact, and listening on the radio, I think Colin Frey pointed out that they they changed half their outfield players, hadn't they? They'd changed 5 of the 10, which is something that we've got to get used to happening potentially in games. But by that stage, changing 5 of 10 players, was that too many? I mean, yes, the players were jaded and it may be a bit leggy. It's the same with every team, but that was another thing. I just felt in the second half they looked leggy, they looked out of ideas, they looked like they hadn't got much left in them. But by the time you changed 5 of your 10 players, it was a totally different look to the starting lineup, and maybe that was an issue. As I say, I said at half time, I said I still think they can get back in. I said to a colleague, I still think they can get back into this, because they normally get that one clear-cut chance a game or two. The way they play isn't conducive to lots of chances, as we all know by now. They let teams come at them, and if that had been a home game that we normally know a home game, would things have been different with a big crowd? Maybe things might have been different. Maybe it's been fascinating to see. And I know the stats at the very start in the Championship, there was more away wins than home wins. I'm not sure whether that's still the case, because I've not seen the stats for the past week or so of games. But no, the second half was probably one of the more. It was certainly the most disappointing half since restart. And thinking back to that, I mean, they lost 3-0, didn't they, in the game before the lockdown. So, but the second half, as I said, a couple of times, it was just the fact that you just felt they didn't look like they were going to score a goal.
Obviously, they did make those 5 changes, and not amongst them was Carvalho, the man that's talked about more than anyone. But so many people have said it looked like on paper the kind of game that cried out for Carvalho. Is that true, do you think? Did Lamucci make a bit of a mistake there? And obviously there's the longer term question of Carvalho's future.
I'm not sure about that, I mean, Carvalho hasn't made the impact this season that he made last season. And some might argue that he's not been given that chance. He's not been given the extended run in the team. But even I've just felt, and look, by all means, I've not seen every game live by a long shot, but I've followed a lot of possible and seen quite a lot this season. But you just feel that when Carvalho has come on, he's not really made an impact. I mean, maybe at QPR, 4-0 away, he scored, and I think and maybe set another one up. So I'm a little bit torn with the Carvalho debate. I understand fans wanting him on, but I think that they're remembering the Carvalho that kind of started last season really well. And there's got to be reasons now why managers aren't picking him regularly. And it's an interesting situation, isn't it? Because it was Martin O'Neill who started to first leave him out, wasn't it, last season? And Martin O'Neill took a bit of stick from the fans then. And Lamucci, for whatever reason, has not liked him. So I understand fans saying it was crying out for Carvalho, but there's been games where Carvalho has been put on in a similar situation and has not had the impact. Now, he might argue, you're giving me 15 minutes, 20 minutes here. what do you want me to do? But the manager might say, well, I want you to come on and change the game, and he hasn't done that in the past. So it's an interesting debate. But they are going to have to do something, I think, with Carvalho, because he's an asset, and I guess his stock is dwindling. I mean, he's probably not worth 11 million now. Certainly not in the market probably now with the time that we're in. So they're going to have to probably make a decision about Carvalho, because he's going to be a very expensive player to have sitting around if he's not going to make an impact. And he's not, he's getting on the bench, but he's not starting, and if he does come on, it's for small cameos, and we're not seeing enough of him really. But it's a very interesting question, and I think it's one that Lamouchi will have to answer, by the end of the season.
Do you think he can fit into a Lamouchi team in some role, because he doesn't play that 10 role at the way Silva plays it? Brennan Johnson was ahead of him in the pecking order. He's not a left winger like Amiobi who gets up and down the line. If Lamouchi signed a 2-year contract now, so Lamouchi's here next year, do you think Carvalho can be here as it's with the current setup?
I think you make a very good point, and that's what I was touching on earlier. He clearly does not fit into Lamouchi's plans, and other players have gone ahead of him and have done well when they've come in. You can't criticize some of the players that have come in ahead of him. So I think you're right. Lamouchi doesn't see the way that Forest play to suit the style. Clearly, Carvalho has fared better in the past for Forest, but it's not something that's happening now. And that's why, maybe Forest should cash in on the asset. I really don't think they'll get 11 million for him, especially, under the current climate. What's the transfer market going to look like? But if they could get, I don't know, 7-8 million for him, that could be used to fund something next season. So it's a really interesting question. But as we say, under Lamouchi, when he's had his chances, I really don't think he's made an impact. It'll be interesting to see actually how many minutes he's had. I mean, it doesn't feel like he's started a game for an age. Well, we've had a long lockdown, haven't we, as well? But I think you make a good point, Matt, in that the way Lamouchi plays it, he just doesn't feel that he fits into it. And you do feel like he's a spare part for Forest now.
What do you think about wider squad depth? Because obviously at Derby, players came on and changed the game, but we've seen when Lamouchi's had to make changes, or feels he has to make changes in his starting lineup, like the Charlton game, it hasn't worked. Last night, it didn't really work. Forest obviously got a very strong 11, 12, 13, 14. Have they got a big enough squad now with teams now to make 5 subs a game? Have they got enough strength in depth to go up ultimately or not?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And again, I was talking about this with a colleague, and I think you've hit the right phrase. They've got about 13, 14, 15 players that I think fit into his system. And obviously the changes he made for Derby worked, didn't they? And it was a slightly more, well, I was going to say it was a slightly more defensive looking side at the time. Well, let's be honest, though, they created a lot of chances for whatever reason. They nullified Rooney for 96 minutes, didn't they? But you're right in saying that they've kind of got 13, 14, 15 players now who can rotate. But after that, the players they've got aren't making that impact. And, the players that came off the bench last night made very little impact at all. They didn't get into the game. Whereas, on Saturday, the substitutions worked. But that's because the players that came on initially were in those 13, 14 players. I mean, Da Costa's been added to that now, and you probably felt before lockdown, he wasn't, but he's now showing that he's one of those players I think that fits into this team at the moment. But beyond that 15, that's a really good point. You feel as though you've got fringe players who perhaps can't make an impact. I mean, there's a few that, because they're defensive players, Michael Dawson could slot into central defence without a problem, but defence isn't really the issue. Apart from the lapses in concentration they're having, it's getting that creativity up front. And that is a concern. Squad depth, especially if they go up, and for next season. I mean, if they go up, of course, it's going to have to look a bit different. But if they don't go up and they want to challenge to be a top 2 side rather than a playoff side, which is ultimately their aim, they're going to have to add a bit more quality so that the subs can make an impact, because it just feels now that he's relying, and those core players are very, very good, but you need more than that if you want to be successful.
At the core of the core, I suppose, if you will, is Samba Sow, who's just completely integral to the way they play. He was good in the first half, then he either had, they perhaps felt he had to come off at half time because of his injury. if we assume Forest aren't going to get automatic promotion, which I think is fair, and they probably are going to get in the playoffs, do you consider, if you're Lamucci now, do you consider wrapping Sow in kid glove and just focusing on the playoffs? Because Forest are they're almost a totally different team with him in the side.
That's a really good and tough question, isn't it? I mean, they're not in the playoffs yet. I mean, I suppose if Derby start to drop some points, that will help them immensely. And games, of course, are running out. That's why it's so frustrating, because they're beating Fulham last night, and beaten Derby as they should have done it. They'd be there almost anyway. I mean, I think everyone knows that they're almost there. It's going to take a massive turnaround, because you can't see them losing lots of games between now and the end of the season. They are going to pick up points, but that's a great question about him. I mean, I think you're going to have to play him somewhere down the line. I don't think they can not play him. But Ryan Yates comes in and does a job. I mean, I think it frustrates me about some sections of the Forest fan base is Ryan Yates has become one of those players that, for whatever reason, gets targeted. Ben Osborne was one. You go back to, I wasn't around, I was a little kid in John McGovern's days, but my dad and mum and friends tell me about how people criticised John McGovern because he wasn't a flair player. And for whatever reason, we all see social media, and someone like Ryan Yates gets into the lineup and it's like, oh, Yates again. But he's, to me, when I see him play, he doesn't put many feet wrong. And let's not forget, he's played recently in a defensive position. He can play a bit further forward, and I think he's key to Forest. So we'll probably see more of Yates if Samba Sow is not going to play. I mean, the thing is that around that midfield, he can move his players around, and some of them can adapt to those positions, which I think is important. And they have shown in, let's put Tuesday aside, they've shown in recent games they can be flexible. But a player like Samba Sow, you're right, is going to be crucial if and when Forest get in the playoffs. But as I say, just keeping him healthy is the biggest concern. And you wonder what, long term for him. He's had all this time off in lockdown, but he's still not fully fit. So you wonder, with his career, is it something he's stuck with? I mean, he did say the other day he thinks he's over the worst of it now, and let's cross fingers, because as you say, Matt, he's integral to what Forest do, and when he's on form and in the side and doing what he does best, Forest look a totally different prospect.
Yeah, I guess if Semedo or someone like that was playing better, then it would be less of a concern. But it comes back to that depth question, doesn't it? I thought Semedo was someone that looked really good at the start of the season, then an injury affected him, and now Sow's struggling, as you say. It all comes back to that depth question, looking ahead to Preston, which is another big game on Saturday. It's pretty relentless now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, they just come one after the other. I mean, I suppose on one bonus, you've not got too much time to be downhearted, but on the other side, you look at Saturday, and some people were saying was the late goal still in their minds? I mean, was it a hangover kind of on Tuesday? Were they still kind of a bit hung up about it? You'd like not to think they were. I mean, Lamucci came out on Monday, didn't they, and gave some stirring words, which were fantastic, and got a great response from the Forest fans. But no, this squad doesn't tend to play two bad games in a row, does it? And although Saturday felt like a bad result, it was I thought Saturday was one of the best performances I'd seen all season. They clearly did what Lamucci told them to do, and they were brilliant for 95 minutes. If one of those goals goes in, I mean, Grabban put one over the bar, didn't he? It was Silva who hit the post. They win that game. So yes, they were not great on Tuesday night, but you see normally a bad performance like that is quite quickly put away, and we can't disguise Saturday as a bad performance. That was just a bad result, and one that stung for a long time. But I fancy them to go to Preston, and I fancy them to get a result. Grabban, might go 2 or 3 games without a goal, but then he'll be back amongst them. We've seen a pattern this season. So yeah, but it's huge. I mean, they get a win. Again, even if the teams in the chasing pack win, it's another game that's ticked off, and they're closer there. But they're better for whatever reason away from home than they are at home. So they should be confident going into the weekend.
When we look at the league table, Forest are 5th. Preston are one of those teams that clutch. I think they're down in 12th now, about 5 points off the playoffs. Are we at the stage now where Forest win this game, it knocks Preston out, and then you're looking at Millwall, Blackburn, Swansea, Derby, Cardiff as that chasing pack?
I think so. I think you're right. I mean, Derby are the worry, aren't they? And it'll be very interesting to see, their result against West Brom. West Brom are obviously for the reasons of automatic, that they'll be desperate to get some light again between them and the chasing pack. But it's interesting because we went into the game against Derby, and then they won 5 straight, hadn't they? And everyone said Derby are fantastic, and I've no doubt they are. It's just Forest played so well on Saturday and made them look very ordinary. But I think they'll be that team maybe that that everyone said. People always say there's one team that comes from a long way down and gets into the playoffs. Well, let's hope for Forest's sake that it's at the expense of, let's say, Cardiff. So I think Derby are still a threat. Swansea, but looking below that, have the others got much in them? Blackburn got a great result, didn't they, against Cardiff? Bristol City are done, aren't they? They're on the decline. Mathematically, they'll still feel that they're in it, but they're too far behind now and struggling. I personally think Derby and Swansea are the ones who might have a chance. I know the table mathematically says otherwise, but I think Derby and Swansea will be the ones. Preston will say otherwise if they can beat Forest on Saturday. But realistically, I think maybe Forest and Cardiff need to look over their shoulders at perhaps Derby and Swansea.
Is there a team in the playoff pack that worries you? If I look at it, I would pick out Cardiff if they get there. I know Forest won there, but Cardiff have got a really good record against Forest. And Fulham, Forest went there and won, but that's the best I've seen them play all season. I thought Fulham had that kind of competitive physical nature that I think Forest do struggle against a bit. I wouldn't worry about playing a Brentford or a Swansea or a Derby so much. Is there a team that troubles you more at that pack?
That's interesting you say Brentford, because they're on fine form, aren't they? Although you're right, maybe playing Brentford would be more suited to Forest, perhaps. Looking from last night, Fulham, they've still got experienced Premier League players in that lineup, haven't they? Let's not forget they're playing a side, that have been in the Premier League so recently.
Yeah, and that's Mitrovic or Kearney as well.
Exactly, and I remember thinking when both of those were out, I said, "Well, this is a great chance for Forest." But it's that experience. It's that experience to see games out. And again, you didn't feel like Fulham were going to, the way the game went, just like Forest against Derby, you didn't feel like Forest were going to concede, but they did. With Forest that they've got that one lapse in them, which is such a frustrating trait that they've now managed to have for 4 games. Remarkable that 4 games in injury time and 2 since lockdown, since the season restarted. But I think you're right. Fulham would worry me the most. Derby, from what we've seen against Derby, they're 2 very different Derbys. Derby, when Forest played them at home, were in a bit more of a mess, I think, than the Derby that we saw on the road. But they matched up well against Derby, and they have done for the last couple of years. But I think Fulham, to me, would be not one to face. Brentford, on the way they're playing, you think, well, you wouldn't want to face them. But as you say, Forest have played well against Brentford. But it's interesting. You've got to kind of, who would they face? You feel Forest are more likely to finish 4th or 5th now than 3rd. They could still finish 6th. There was a couple of games ago, 3rd looked a possibility, didn't it? So, and then you've got that, 2 legs is interesting because how will that play out tactically? And then in a one-off final, would I want to face it? Would I want to face the sort of experience of Fulham in a one-off final? Probably not. Would I fancy our chances maybe against Brentford? Yeah, I think I would. Derby, that would be a nightmare, wouldn't it, for anyone? Which way that's going to go? But it's fascinating. But yeah, they just got to get the 3 points on Saturday to make the nerves a little bit less.
Looking at the run-in as it stands, then Swansea to come, another team up there, Barnsley and Stoke. Is that a good run-in for Forest to get over the line with hopefully some points on the board?
I think so. You would expect them. You'd expect them to get 6 points out of Barnsley and Stoke, but if the pressure's on, that's the thing. How will this team play under real pressure? And we've not, they've not had must-win pressure a lot this season, have they really? I mean, obviously they've had massive games, and it depends how you kind of define what I'm saying with must-win. I mean, their record against teams in the top six is pretty decent until this defeat by Swansea, or teams a defeat by Fulham, should I say. Their record against teams around them and above them in the table has been really good. But yeah, I mean, the next two are interesting. How will Swansea be at home? That's not going to be an easy one. But if they can pick up, even if they can pick up 4 points out of their next two games, or either way, a draw and a win, or a win and a draw, Barnsley away. I mean, if they can't win Barnsley away when they need to, they don't deserve to get in the playoffs, do they? So, and then Stoke at home. That running is not hard compared. I mean, Derby, I read, it got a lot of teams above them and around them, so that'll be tough for them. But to me, that running, there's enough. Forest should get the points they need to get in the playoffs there by comfortable distance. But let's see how real pressure in those games. I guess, I mean, if they win Saturday, the pressure starts to come off. And if they lose Saturday and others around them win, then the pressure's on. So it'll be interesting to see how they play then.
And in just terms of specifically Saturday, do you make a lot of changes at Preston, or do you? Because Lamucci he's stuck with this core group that we've referred to a few times. Does he have to just keep going with that group now?
I mean, is there a place for someone like Dawson? Does he rest one of his defenders? If one of them's a bit leggy, maybe. But as we keep going back to, it's not the defence that's worrying him at the moment. Apart from that lapse in concentration, but the games are coming thick and fast. And even though that back five are solid, you do feel that one of them might need a break. Does Jenkinson maybe get into the side somehow?
Yeah. And Lolly's hobbling around at the moment.
Well, that's a good point. Lolly's not 100% fit. Does he go with a? I mean, the lineup that played at Derby for the first however many minutes until he made his subs worked, and then the subs came on and made an impact. So I wonder whether he goes back to that slightly more defensive looking lineup in terms of the type of player that he played. Because I saw a lot of players saying, Forest have come for a point here. A lot of fans saying Forest have come for a point here. But they forget that like the players that can create are some of the best creative players in the league. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. I mean, Asau has now started the last two, hasn't he? And come off in them both. So you wonder whether he perhaps won't. Yeah, I mean, maybe he won't start. Yates will maybe get a start. Can he do something to shake it around? He's not gonna drop Graben, is he? And I don't think Graben looks as though he's carrying an injury or anything. And they need Graben because he will just get a goal out of nothing. So it's an interesting selection conundrum. I just wonder whether he might make a change in defence just because of the run of games, and I think that back five is his chosen back five, and he'll want that back five going into the playoffs. So there might be the odd change there, but then again, why upset something that's worked so well? But there's bound to be a couple of changes. It'll be interesting to see where they are.
As is tradition in a show that's 17 episodes old, give us your prediction for the Fulham game. See if you're right.
Fulham.
Preston.
Fulham. I think Fulham are going to win 1-0.
That's why you're the professional broadcaster and I'm the amateur.
Well, I'm not sure about that. You've seen all my bloopers. Crumbs. Okay, I hate being put on the spot. Okay, well, Forest don't concede many. I'm going to go for 1-0 Forest.
I'll go for 1-0 Forest as well, actually. I can see Forest in the game. Preston are a good side. They're not in good form, so it's probably a good time to play them.
And Lewis Grabham. 1-0 Forest, Lewis Grabham.
Yeah, last nail in Preston's coffin. Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Good. Yeah, like I said, I'm a total amateur and you're a total pro. So
I'm not sure.
Good. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your debut and hope you'll come back.
Yeah, anytime.
If people enjoyed, do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast. There's a million different providers and there's a million different podcasts, especially for Forest. So we do appreciate anyone who's listening into this. And join us again next week when we'll be back looking back on Preston and looking forward to Swansea. Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening.